This is an AI-generated podcast based on the article Keep Your Tire in the Furrow, How a Farm Kid Became a Century-Old Bank's Change Agent, written by Judy Bontrager. The article link is in the show notes. Welcome to Kingdom Factor Collective. I'm your host, Judy Bontrager, and today I'm sitting down with D. Joe Caffey, President and CEO of First State Bank of Middlebury, a northern Indiana community bank approaching $900 million in assets. Joe's story is one of those that it stays with you. From sharecropping roots to leading a century-old institution through real transformation. Joe, thanks for being here.
Judy, really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I have to start at the beginning because I think it sets everything up. You grew up on a farm in Berne, Indiana. Your dad was essentially sharecropping, and at 8 years old, you got a bull calf named Freddie. Can you just take me back to that?
Yeah, so Dad had a lot of corn. That was what we had, right? He loaded me up in the Dodge pickup, we drove to a local dairy farm, and he let me pick out a bull calf. The deal was simple. He supplied the corn to feed the steer, I supplied the labor. 18 months later, Freddie went to market. We kept a quarter of the beef, and I sold the rest to neighbors and family. And that 8-year-old kid with a bull calf, that whole small cattle enterprise ended up paying for my entire college education, debt-free.
That's incredible. And you've actually passed that model on to your own kids, right?
We have, yeah. All 3 of our kids have raised and sold 4-H animals. Our oldest, Grace, just graduated college debt-free. Jess is on track to do the same. You know, those lessons about being connected to the land, the work ethic, the value of a dollar. I think farm kids have a real advantage. You learn that what you have, you can convert into what you need. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think that's a kind of leverage that doesn't show up in any business textbook. Now, faith is obviously woven through your whole story, but there's this really honest moment you describe. You were 18, driving alone, and something shifted. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, so I grew up in a deeply conservative denomination. I always tell people I grew up just left of the Amish. Very structured, very reverent. And the faith there was sincere, it really was. But inherited faith isn't the same as own faith, right? I was driving alone at 18 and it just crystallized for me. My parents' faith needed to become my own. I gave my life to Christ alone in that car, and it started reshaping everything from that point forward.
That's a really significant distinction, inherited versus owned faith. And then you get to Purdue, you turn down a fraternity, you end up at this Christian men's cooperative called Fairway House. What did that community do for you?
So, 50 men living together, taking their faith seriously. And one evening in a Bible study, a leader asked me to pray aloud for the group. I prayed the way I'd always been raised, short, structured, reverent. And then this leader, he slowly, specifically, personally prayed for every single need that had been shared. And I just sat in that silence afterward and thought, there is so much I don't know about how other people walk with God. That was a great moment for me. And Judy, both of my daughters ended up choosing the sister cooperative house at Purdue, and they love it.
That is such a God thing. Okay, so let's fast forward into your banking career. You came in with an ag education degree, you'd been teaching, you took a credit analyst job, and 90 days in, the bank president knocks on your cubicle wall. What happened?
A loan officer had just quit, and I got promoted on the spot. And in my inspiring training to become a lender was essentially don't screw up. That was it. So I figured it out, spent the next 12 and a half years rising through that organization. But eventually, I could see the ceiling clearly. The new president was only 8 years older than me. So I found an ad for a northern Indiana bank seeking a president and CEO, threw my name in, and 9 months later, we moved the family to Middlebury. That was 12 years ago.
And before you accepted the role, you spent a full Saturday locked in their boardroom going through files for, 6 to 8 hours? That level of diligence that tells you a lot about how you operate. What did you find?
It excited me and sobered me at the same time, honestly. The average employee tenure was really long. People came to First State Bank and built their whole careers there. And I said to the board, do you want to maintain the status quo or do you want to grow? They said they wanted change, so I knew what I was walking into. I was 39. The average employee age was 56. I had less experience than many of the people I was being asked to lead. It was a lot.
And that first year, roughly 35% of the staff turned over. That's not a small number. How do you lead through that and keep your own integrity intact?
We also offered a voluntary early retirement program to 11 qualifying employees. 8 accepted, and all 8 of those people, all 8, still stopped to hug me in the lobby because I knew it was a very fair and honorable offer that we made. You can do hard things and still do them with dignity. That matters. And look, when I arrived, we had about $400 million in assets and 130 employees. Today, we're approaching $900 million in assets with 120 employees. We serve more customers with fewer people because we've invested heavily in technology. We now have our own private cloud AI environment. Our team logged more than 1,000 AI-assisted queries in a single week last month.
That is a remarkable transformation. But Joe, I have to ask about something much more personal. 6 years ago, your wife Cheryl was diagnosed with stage 3 metastatic melanoma. 41 trips to Mayo Clinic, and 6 weeks before this conversation, the cancer returned for the 4th time. You recently performed your daughter's Grace's wedding ceremony. How do you hold all of that?
Yeah, so Cheryl and we held the news quietly until after 2 family milestones we had prayed to reach: our son Trey's high school graduation and Grace's wedding. 2 days after the wedding, we drove back to Mayo for surgery. And preparing for that wedding ceremony, I kept returning to the story in John's Gospel of Jesus turning water into wine at Cana. Specifically, the moment when the host says the best wine was saved for last. And I kept thinking, the average wine, that's our jobs, our possessions, our stuff. Those are good things. But the really good wine, the best wine, is saved for later. It's saved for those moments with Christ. When everything else strips away, I don't know what you do if you don't have the good wine. The average stuff doesn't matter as much anymore at our house.
That is a profound and honest theology, hammered out in hospital waiting rooms, not polished for a stage. Last question. When you think about what you're most proud of, what comes to mind first?
My 3 kids. Just that. Not the bank's growth, not the technology transformation. My 3 kids. They're still a close family unit. They're productive, and all 3 have a faith they're making their own. I learned firsthand at 18 alone in a car that faith cannot be transferred by proximity or tradition. It has to be chosen. My grandparents and parents left a long legacy of faith. Then it was Cheryl and my job to cut that furrow for our kids to stay in. Hopefully we've done that.
Joe, thank you, genuinely. This conversation is going to stay with me for a long time. For everyone listening, the full article that inspired this episode is linked in the show notes. It's worth the read. And ask yourself, is there a furrow in front of you right now? A proven path, a legacy of faithfulness that you've been drifting away from? Thanks for being part of Kingdom Factor Collective. We'll see you next time.